Welcome to the Leader Pulse podcast, the podcast with actionable insights for leaders revolutionizing the world of work. I'm Holly Tate, your host and Chief Marketing Officer here at Leader. In today's episode, we're releasing a bonus episode, which is the full interview with Matt Tresidder and Frank Blake, former CEO of Home Depot. The last 4 episodes here on the Leader Pulse podcast, Matt and I have unpacked his conversation with Frank Blake, going really deep on all of the gold that Frank dropped throughout this entire interview. But in today's episode, you'll get to hear the full raw interview between Matt Tresidder and Frank Blake. So let's take a listen.
I'm an executive, and I'm trying to balance the firefighting and the priorities that pop up for me every Monday, but I'm losing touch with the front lines and I'm losing touch with my customers. What do I do?
So the first comment is that as a leader, I think it's important to understand that your job is not to make the most number of decisions the most efficiently. That in fact, your job is to pick the 4 or 5 things that really need to move in your organization and move those things deliberately and consciously over time. Someone had a great description for me. They came into my office at one point early on when I was CEO and said, "You're screwing this up." And I said, "How so?" And he did a little chart that showed, a big gear at the top and then a lot of gears going down. And he said, "Look what happens if that top gear is spinning and, just frantically making decisions. All those bottom gears are spinning out of control." He said, "Your job is spin 4 or 5 big things, and then you need to be conscious of when the gears down below you are moving. Understand why they're moving and whether they're moving in the right or the wrong direction." So that's to say, as you prioritize your schedule as a leader, prioritize not the firefighting, figure out you ought to have a team on who you rely for firefighting activities, but you should be prioritizing making sure you're understanding what's happening in your organization, what's moving your organization, whether it's going in the direction you want.
Got it. Okay, that's gold. That's gold. And so I've got to ask this then. Why did you choose, of all of the gears that you could have chosen to pick when you were leading Home Depot, why did you choose the gear of I'm going to spend so much time at the stores? Because it seems to me most executives would say, "I don't have time for that. I need to sit in the office at headquarters with everybody else." That feels like a strange gear to pick.
So I wouldn't say, just in fairness, if you looked at the percentage of my time, I'm not sure I spent more than 50% of my time in the stores, but I spent a lot more time in the stores than other leaders did or might have. And the answer is, so again, I have a theory of the case for how organizations work. I think organizations, for the most part, don't want their leader to understand what is actually happening. I tell leaders, that story about the frog that gets boiled. Just understand that you are the frog your organization's trying to boil. They don't like change. Organizations don't like change. They want to keep you in a controlled cocoon. So the first thing you need to do is to understand actually what's the temperature around you. What is actually happening? You're not going to find that by surrounding yourself with the people in headquarters. They're going to tell you what they have made it a career of figuring out what you want to hear and giving that to you. Right. What you need to do is find out what's actually happening with your customers, with your vendors, and with your frontline employees.
Okay. Why not send someone else though? Because surely you had a number 2 or number 3 that you could have said, "Hey, go there and find out, and then report back to me on what's really happening." Why make it a priority for yourself?
Well, I would say, why would you ask somebody else to tell you what's really happening? I mean, if you're interested, if you're saying my first obligation is to understand what's really happening,
right?
Why would I be sending somebody else to figure that out?
True.
And I mean, that's true for vendors. It's
Mm,
true for your frontline associates, and it's true for your customers. You ought to be having, and by the way, I was very reassured on this at some point. This was while Bezos was still at Amazon. Had the chance to have a long lunch with him, and we kind of went through management strategies, how you think about growing businesses and the like. And I was very reassured that he had exactly the same point.
really?
Yeah, very much.
Okay.
And he didn't have a physical store so much to
Sure.
walk around, but the customer insights, when customers would complain, getting close to those complaints, understanding them,
Yeah.
that was critical to how he managed his business, as it was with Jack Welch. When I worked for Welch, I saw the exact
Right.
same thing. So the notion that the people around you are the people who are going
Interesting.
to give you the straight story, I think is a bit of a mistake.
I have heard that Bezos, when someone told him that they didn't have a customer call support hours problem, he, in the middle of an executive team, just called the inbound support number.
There you go. There you go.
Um, so how do you know which gears to pick? I would love to double click on that. So you obviously knew that one of the gears you had to pick at the time was dialing in customer service, dialing in customer centric culture. How do you know as the CEO? There's like a million things you could have picked.
Yeah, so that's critical, right? It is actually critical figuring out what the right 4 or 5 things are and
Mm,
to effectively resource them and make them differentiated. So that's not an easy process, and it takes, you do need to understand what you think your customers are telling you. Customer service wasn't the only thing we picked. We had other
sure.
things that we were focused on. Some of them, are precursors to effectively addressing your customer needs, like
Yeah.
fixing your inventory situation, which goes back to your supply chain. You do have to have a comfort level with what your organization needs to really hone in on the 4 or 5 things. In fact, I'd say a lot of organizations, you can see that they don't have that comfort level because they have too damn many priorities.
Mm,
And
mm,
when you feel like you understand, okay, what is going to drive the economic engine of this business, that gets you down to the 4 or 5 big gears. Now, I believe we had a very participatory effort with the leadership team on what they
yeah.
were. It wasn't just me going off and coming down from on high saying, here are the 5 things. But when we settled on them, it was those
Mm,
5 things. There was, prior to my becoming CEO, if you went around Home Depot, you would have seen banners all over the place saying, improve everything you touch, as a mantra for the company. My first comment to our officers at Home Depot was, don't
huh.
improve everything you touch. We are going to improve these 5 things. If you're not working on these 5 things, work
Mm,
hard at what you're doing, but you're not going to get resources to make those better. You just do the
mm.
best you can. If you're working on those 5 things, those are the 5 things we're going to resource. But don't think our objective is to improve everything.
Wow. Okay, so I had a motto for the last 2 years that I would share with my leadership team, and it
Yeah,
was refuse to be the bottleneck. That was kind of Matt's line, refuse to be
yeah,
the
that's good.
bottleneck. And well, maybe, but I had a friend come and tell me, hey, I've got to give you some feedback. Actually, as a CEO, you should choose when to be the bottleneck because your standard of excellence and your bar for what good looks like is so much higher. Sometimes, and I think it's tiny to your point, sometimes you should choose to say no as opposed to saying yes to everything. And so now you're even
It
challenging me even
depends which
more.
way the bottleneck is going. If
Right, right.
if the bottleneck is, hey, look, I can fix this. I don't need your resources. Matt, I don't need your help. I can fix this. Don't be the
Right.
neck on that. If
Uh,
if it is, Matt, I need 25% of your resources to fix my problem,
mm,
be the bottleneck. So it
yeah,
kind of
right.
depends which way you're empowering your people.
That's a really good point. Okay, so you must work and have interface with a lot of new managers, new executives on a
Yeah.
frequent basis. What do you think are some of the traps that they fall into? And you say you've got too many gears spinning right now. Are there certain things that are really obvious ones? Like I don't know if it's too many meetings or too much travel or not enough travel. What is it?
So I think it starts with the most basic level. So my view is I tell leaders that they need to get two things right. If they get them right, odds are things will work out. If they get them wrong, doesn't matter what else they do, it won't work out. They've got to get where they allocate their resources, their CapEx and their spend, and where they allocate their people. They get those two things right, good things happen. And when it comes to focus on allocating resources, what's critical is that you actually differentiate it. So too many leaders try to keep everybody happy with the resources that they allocate and don't actually change the resource allocation over time. That is a guarantee indicator of a problem because there's always change. And if you look at the different elements of a business and they all get the same resources, give or take 5% every year, you're not changing fast enough. You're not making differentiated decisions. So you need to make differentiated decision on how you allocate your resources. And then on people, look, we're all subject to the same thing. We move too slowly on people, and we don't hold ourselves accountable to having the best people working on our biggest problems. There are lots of reasons for that. Every single leader I know falls prey to that, but it's a great exercise to sit down and say, here are my 5 biggest problems in the company or in my branch or whatever I'm doing. Here are my 5 best people. How's that look? And be honest. Don't do, I mean, you can't really, a lot of times people feel comfortable because their HR organization is an echo of their own thoughts.
Right.
So you got to get honest feedback of, do I actually have the best people working on the toughest?
The HR organization is an echo of your own thoughts. That's convicting. That's convicting.
That is very true. Look, everybody's, again, everybody, one of the great comments made to me by Bernie Marcus, one of the founders of Home Depot, as I was taking over, he said, look, you're going to go into the executive room and everybody's going to be around the table and you're going to tell a joke and everyone will laugh. Said, let me tell you, you're not funny. That's the point. People adjust to you. They laugh at your jokes. They tell you you're smart. They tell you what you want to hear. That does not make a great company.
Yep.
And believing that is the one sure way to not help your company become great.
Frank, the first week I was the CEO, this is 3 years ago now, a mentor of mine was a board member actually at the end of my first week says, how did it feel? And I was like, I don't feel a lot different. And he said, what changed for everyone else around you? And I literally said, they started laughing at my jokes. I was like, I got a lot funnier this week.
Yep, there you go.
What's the biggest trap that a new executive you think falls into?
I think they get, there are a number of traps, but they are not intentional enough about the setting up the culture that they want to encourage and recognizing and celebrating the people who are living to that culture.
Got it. And do you have any words of wisdom around how to set culture?
Well, no, I think every leader ought to be able to say, here is the one thing or the 2 things, but shouldn't be more than 1 or 2 that I am passionate about in terms of what's going to drive change and success in this organization. And then I am going to be intentional about finding it, recognizing it, and celebrating it when it occurs within my branch or my company, whatever it is, because I know that if I do that, I'm going to get more of it. And if I'm right in my assessment of what's going to drive our success, that's how we're going to drive success.
Why such an impetus on focus, Frank? I can hear some people, as you're sharing, internally monologuing with, I have more capacity. I can handle more than just a couple of things. I can do, me and my team, we could do 10 things all at once. You've mentioned so many times focus and few gears. Why such an impetus on that?
Because excellence is brutally difficult. I mean, if you actually want to be better than anybody, I mean, I love Jim Collins's, what does every company need to do? You need to know what you're passionate about. You need to know what you're best in the world at, and you need to know what
Gotta make-
drives your economic engine. That covers it. But what your best, if you take that seriously and you say, what are we going to be the best in the world at? If you say I'm going to be the best in the world at 10 things, I go, then not right.
Right.
Maybe you
Right.
make 5. Maybe you make 3.
Right.
Hey, if you
Right.
make 1, you're going to be
True.
awesome. But
True.
best in the world, it takes incredible discipline and focus to be the best in the world. And if you're
Love
doing
it.
something, again, if it gets diffused too easily, and frankly, your organization is thrilled with diffusion. Everybody loves having 50 different priorities. Everybody complains, but in their heart, they love having a ton of meetings. They love it.
Makes you feel important, right?
Makes you feel important. There's nothing that you're actually responsible for. Life is sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You live at the behest of your calendar.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. We're at time. You're sitting down, you're having a one-on-one, you're across the table and having a coffee with a first-time executive, first-time manager. What's your advice to them?
That's my advice. That is what my big learning at Home Depot was, I mean, everybody already knows the catchphrase, you get what you measure. My corollary to that is you get what you recognize and celebrate. Be intentional about it. Not enough leaders spend time on it. And if you do, that's going to drive the success in your business.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Did you know that we send out a weekly email called Leader Pulse? You can subscribe to it on our website, leadr.com. That's leadr.com. It's got actionable insights for leaders revolutionizing the world of work. So if you're enjoying this podcast, check out our website and subscribe to our weekly email. Now, you also might not know that Matt and Chris, our co-founders, they wrote a book called Management is Dead. It's all about this topic of creating a revolution around the ROI of people development. You can check it out at managementisdead.com. You can order your copy anywhere books are sold, and make sure that you order it, read it with your team. It's jam-packed full of insights for you to be the best leader that you can be. We'll see you next time on the Leader Pulse podcast.